911, what's your emergency?
Oh, please! You have to come! I found her. Oh, God, there's so much blood!
Ma'am, stay on the line. I need your address.
It's Alyssa's place, Pinecrest Apartments. I came over for coffee, and she's not moving.
No.
Wake up, please, wake up there, ma'am.
It's just me. I'm your...
I wonder what the acoustics are like in a solitary cell.
You're going to keep walking now.
This reconstruction draws from how these incidents are typically documented, reviewed, and investigated after the fact. Names and certain identifying details have been altered. Imagine a woman standing over the body of her best friend. She isn't calling for help. She isn't trying to stop the bleeding. Instead, she's holding a stopwatch, counting the seconds until the heartbeat fades, purely to see how long it takes. This is the story of 26-year-old Lena Whitaker, a woman who, on a cold January night in 2025, decided that her lifelong friendship with 24-year-old Alyssa Morgan was worth less than a few minutes of twisted curiosity. Lena Whitaker didn't have a motive. She didn't want Alyssa's money, her boyfriend, or her job. She killed Alyssa for the same reason a child pulls the wings off a fly. She wanted to see what would happen. This decision will cost Lena her freedom, her family, and her soul. But at 10:14 p.m. that night, all it cost her was a bottle of wine and a lie. For those of you watching in, type your city/stay in the comments. Have you ever looked at a close friend and realized you have no idea what's actually happening behind their eyes? If you believe that true evil shouldn't be allowed to hide behind a best friend mask, hit that subscribe button. We're going to show you exactly how the Oak Haven police caught a ghost. The investigation began as a robbery gone wrong, but the evidence told a different story. The hallway security camera shows Lena arriving at the apartment. She's wearing a bright yellow raincoat, later found to be a deliberate choice because the material is easy to wipe clean. When we analyzed the footage, Detective Marcus Thorne explained in his investigative notes, we noticed Lena stayed in the hallway for 30 seconds before knocking. She wasn't nervous. She was practicing her smile in the reflection of a fire extinguisher. She was tuning her face to look like a girl who just wanted to share a drink. Multiple angles recorded Lena leaving 2 hours later. She isn't running. She isn't covered in blood. In fact, she stops at a vending machine in the lobby and buys a bag of pretzels. She eats them while walking to her car, her movements rhythmic and calm. That was the first red flag, Thorne noted. Who watches their best friend die and then gets an appetite? But the real evidence was hidden in the why. Lena didn't just kill Alyssa. She documented it in a way that would turn the stomach of the most seasoned profiler. We're going to look at the Psychopathy journal the FBI recovered from Lena's bedside table, a book where Alyssa Morgan wasn't a person, but Subject A. Before we continue, if you found out your best friend was keeping a secret journal about your habits and flaws, would you be offended or would you be scared? Let us know in the comments. The investigation was about to take a turn that no one expected. Because while the police were looking for a killer, Lena was already planning her next experiment. And the next subject was already sitting in the room with her during the funeral. And now, her obsession with the process of death is about to destroy her life forever. By January 17th, 2025, the Oak Haven Police Department was no longer looking for a burglar. The autopsy of Alyssa Morgan had come back with a detail that changed everything. There were no defensive wounds. Alyssa hadn't fought for her life because she had been paralyzed by a fast-acting sedative slipped into her wine. This wasn't a crime of passion or a robbery. It was an execution performed with the cold precision of a laboratory trial. And at the center of the investigation was the girl who had spent the last 48 hours helping the police. Lena Whitaker was everywhere, bringing donuts to the precinct, checking in on the lead detective, and even helping Alyssa's mother sort through the victim's clothes. She was too helpful. Detective Marcus Thorne later wrote in his case complexity report, she was inserting herself into the investigation not to find the killer, but to watch us work. She wanted to see if our human emotions would blind us to the facts. She was testing us just like she tested Alyssa. As the police began to dig into Lena's background, they found a trail of emotional observations that stretched back to her childhood. Internal case file hashtag 2025 AX witness statement. Former college roommate. Lena used to sit in the corner of the room while I was crying over my breakup. She wouldn't hug me. She wouldn't speak. She just sat there with a notebook, looking at me like I was a science project. When I asked her what she was doing, she said she was recording the physical manifestations of grief for her own personal growth. I moved out the next week. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was called in. They didn't see a grieving friend. They saw a primary psychopathic predator. They obtained a warrant for Lena's digital life, and what they found in her private notes app was a roadmap to murder. The narration describes a digital trail that reveals Lena had been profiling her friends for years. She had a spreadsheet labeled vulnerabilities. Under Alyssa's name, she had written, "Too trusting. High empathy. Will not suspect a friend. Ideal for observing the transition without the interference of a struggle." The most chilling part, says forensic pathologist Dr. Eris Verma, was the timing. While the police were at the scene on the first morning, Lena was on her phone. We thought she was texting family. She wasn't. She was writing a review of the night. She described the lighting of the room and the sound of the final breath, as if she were a film critic reviewing a movie. The security camera records show Lena entering the Oakhaven Library on the afternoon of January 18th. She spends 4 hours in the archives. When investigators checked the computer she used, they found she had been looking up the names of the jurors from a famous murder trial 3 towns over. She wasn't just planning a murder. She was already preparing to manipulate the legal system for her next experiment. The investigation hit a fever pitch when police found a hidden camera Lena had installed in Alyssa's bedroom weeks before the murder. Lena hadn't just killed her. She had been live streaming Alyssa's private life to herself as a way of studying her subject. She didn't do it for money. There was no evidence of her selling these videos. She did it because she found the mundane details of a normal person's life fascinatingly pathetic. She was like an alien studying a different species before deciding which one to dissect. This level of premeditation is unheard of in most local cases. Do you think someone who spends months studying their victim before a kill is more dangerous than a serial killer who acts on impulse? Share your thoughts in the comments. The stakes were about to explode. While the police were building their case, Lena was already moving on to her next subject. Through a court-ordered wiretap, investigators heard Lena on the phone with another friend, Sarah, just 3 days after Alyssa's death. The audio intercept reveals, "Lena, Sarah, I'm so scared being alone after what happened to Alyssa. Can I come over tonight? I'll bring some wine. We could just sit in the dark and talk." The police realized they didn't have weeks to build a case. They had hours. If they didn't arrest Lena Whitaker tonight, Sarah would be the next subject B in Lena's clinical journal. Furthermore, we'll take you inside the high-stakes takedown, and the moment Lena realized her fun was about to meet the cold reality of a federal interrogation room. By the evening of January 21st, 2025, the Oakhaven Police Department was in a race against a clock only one person could see. While they were processing the digital vulnerability spreadsheet found on Lena's laptop, Lena was already parked outside her next target's house. The transformation of this case happened the moment the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit looked at Lena's search history from that very afternoon. She wasn't looking at travel escapes or legal defenses. She was searching how to mimic a panic attack for police cameras and state-level sentencing for accidental sedative overdose. Lena Whitaker wasn't just a killer. She was a student of her own survival, and she was preparing to claim her next specimen. The point of no return arrived when the cybercrimes unit bypassed a secondary encryption on Lena's phone. They found a series of voice memos recorded during the actual murder of Alyssa Morgan. These weren't recordings of a struggle. They were a director's commentary on the act of killing. Voice Memo Exhibit 109. C. Recorded Jan 14th, 11:35 p.m. The sound of a steady, rhythmic tapping is heard. Lena tapping a pen against a glass. Lena's voice. 11:35 p.m. Subject's pupils are fully dilated. She asked me why her hands feel like cotton. It's interesting. The brain tries to find metaphors for the loss of motor control. I told her it was just the wine. I'm watching the light in her eyes. It doesn't fade like in the movies. It just goes flat, like a screen turning off. Fascinating. I feel nothing but a slight sense of accomplishment, like finishing a puzzle. This recording stripped away any hope of a mental break defense. Lena wasn't insane. She was perfectly, terrifyingly aware. And now that mistake is costing her everything moment. The mistake that finally broke Lena's facade was her own arrogance. She believed she was the smartest person in any room, but she didn't realize that the FBI had activated a federal Title III wiretap on her phone the moment she mentioned Subject B in her notes. The narration describes the scene, as Lena sat in her car outside her friend Sarah's house, holding a bottle of the same wine she had given Alyssa. A fleet of unmarked black SUVs rounded the corner. But they didn't just arrest her for Alyssa's murder. Because she had crossed state lines to purchase the sedative and had documented the act for a dark web archival project, the FBI triggered federal kidnapping and civil rights statutes. The look on her face when the flashlights hit the glass wasn't fear, Detective Thorne recalled. It was annoyance. She looked like a scientist whose experiment had been interrupted by a power outage. Body camera narration, describing the footage, depicts the moment Lena was pulled from her vehicle. As she was pressed against the hood, she didn't cry out for her parents or claim innocence. She looked at the arresting officer's badge and said, "You're the same officer from the hallway on the 15th. Your heart rate is significantly higher now than it was then. Are you feeling a rush of adrenaline from catching me? I'd love to interview you about that later." The case was immediately escalated. The Department of Justice took over the prosecution, moving Lena to a federal holding facility. They realized that for fun was the most dangerous motive a human could have, because it has no ceiling. There is no amount of money or revenge that can satisfy a person who kills just to see the flatness in a friend's eyes. This revelation changes everything. If a killer records their crimes not for profit, but for scientific curiosity, should they be studied by doctors to prevent future psychopaths? Or should the recordings be destroyed to deny the killer their legacy? Join the conversation below. The investigators thought they had seen the worst of it. But as they sat Lena down in the federal interrogation room, she offered them a deal. She would tell them exactly where the others were buried, victims from 3 different states that no one even knew were missing, but only if they allowed her to watch the video of her own arrest. She wanted to see if her surprised face looked convincing on camera. The arrest of Lena Whitaker was just the beginning of a devastating ripple effect that tore through the state of Illinois. As the news broke that the grieving best friend was actually a clinical predator who killed for the sheer novelty of the experience, the community's grief curdled into a cold, sharp fury. But for Lena, the fun was just entering a new phase, the observation of her own destruction. By late January 2025, the Oak Haven PD and the FBI had begun the consequences cascade. This wasn't just a trial. It was the systematic dismantling of a human being who had spent her life dismantling others. The federal government didn't just want a conviction. They wanted a precedent. They brought in world-renowned forensic psychologists to analyze the journal of subjects found in Lena's home. The testimony from the expert Dr. Helena Vance, federal hearing, February 12, 2025. In 20 years of studying sociopathy, I have never seen a dossier like this. Lena Whitaker didn't just kill Alyssa Morgan. She curated her. She documented Alyssa's favorite foods, her fears, and her dreams, specifically to see if those traits changed the quality of her death. This wasn't a crime. It was a harvest of human experience by someone who possesses none. The narration describes a haunting scene from the deposition of Alyssa's mother, Mrs. Morgan. She had to sit in a room and listen to the audio of her daughter's friend describing her daughter as Subject A. "She didn't look at me," Mrs. Morgan sobbed in her impact statement. Lena sat across the table and adjusted her sleeve. "She looked at me once and asked if I had changed my laundry detergent because I smelled different than I did at the funeral." She was still collecting data. Even now, even after she killed my baby. The Whitaker family was the next to fall. Lena's father, a man who had spent 30 years building a reputation as an educator, was forced into hiding after his daughter's future projects list was leaked, a list that included the names of several students at his school. The security camera record from the Whitaker household showed the moment the family's assets were seized under a massive civil lawsuit. Because Lena had used her parents' high-speed internet to research her experiments and stored evidence in their basement, the house was declared a facilitator of a continuing criminal enterprise. They lost everything: their home, their retirement, and their sanity. "She didn't care," says Detective Thorne. When we told her that her parents were homeless and living out of a motel, she just asked if the motel had a gym. She was curious if the stress would make them lose weight. The legal consequences were swift and catastrophic. The federal charges, because she had documented the murder and shared snippets with a dark web curiosity group, she was hit with 15 counts of production of violent exploitative material. Each count carried a 20-year sentence. The state charges, Illinois prosecutors sought the maximum. Life without the possibility of parole, with a special circumstances enhancement for the use of controlled substance in the commission of a murder. The social erasure. In an unprecedented move, the court granted a name erasure injunction for the civil proceedings, ensuring that any profit Lena might ever try to make from a book or movie deal would be automatically diverted to the Morgan family's foundation for victims of violent crime. The cruelty of this case has sparked a national debate. When a killer is this detached, should they be denied the right to participate in their own trial to prevent them from enjoying the attention, or is the right to a defense absolute? Join the debate in the comments. The investigators finally found the breaking point they were looking for, but it wasn't what they expected. Lena didn't crack under the threat of prison. She cracked when the lead prosecutor announced they would not be using her journals in the public portion of the trial to deny her the satisfaction of an audience. The narration describes the footage from the holding cell. For the first time, Lena isn't calm. She's pacing. She's screaming at the walls. Not because she's sorry, but because her masterpiece, her clinical study of Alyssa's death, was being treated as garbage by the state. She wanted to be a pioneer, says Dr. Vance. And we're treating her like a common parasite. The final act of Lena Whitaker's experiment didn't end with a grand scientific breakthrough or a world-changing revelation. It ended in a windowless courtroom in downtown Chicago on November 14, 2025. The woman who had spent years treating the world as a petri dish was about to become the very thing she feared most, a forgotten number in the federal prison system. The resolution of the Alyssa Morgan case wasn't just about a sentence. It was about the total erasure of Lena's influence. The prosecution, in a brilliant tactical move, refused to read her clinical journals aloud. They didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing her work published. Instead, they focused on the only thing Lena couldn't understand, the weight of the hole she left behind. The most powerful moment of the trial wasn't a piece of evidence, but a statement from Alyssa's father. Lena, you spent hours watching my daughter die because you wanted to see the light go out, but you're so blind that you missed the only thing that mattered. The light didn't go out because you killed her. It stayed here, in every person who loved her. You think you're a scientist? You're just a broken mirror. You can't create anything. You can only shatter what better people have built. I don't hate you. To hate you, I'd have to believe you're a human being. I'm just waiting for the guards to take the trash out. The narration describes the scene as Lena sat in the defendant's chair. For the first time in the entire investigation, her mask failed. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She began to twitch. Her hands, usually so steady, began to tap a frantic, irregular rhythm on the mahogany table. She was looking for a reaction, a spark of fear, a sign that she still had power, but the courtroom met her with nothing but cold, silent indifference. The judge's voice was like a hammer. For the state-level murder of Alyssa Morgan, Lena Whitaker was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. For the federal charges related to the production of exploitative content and civil rights violations, she was given an additional 105 years to be served consecutively. Due to her history of profiling cellmates and her expressed desire to continue her studies on other inmates, the Bureau of Prisons designated Lena for administrative security, ADX. She would spend 23 hours a day in a concrete box with zero human contact. The final observation: Lena's parents officially disowned her in a public filing, changing their names and moving out of state. They left her with nothing. No visits, no commissary funds, and no audience. Financial liquidation. Every asset Lena ever touched was sold. The Morgan Foundation for Empathy was established using the millions seized from Lena's dark web accounts, turning Lena's fund into a fund that trains police to spot predators exactly like her. As we close the file on Lena Whitaker, a haunting question remains for the Oak Haven community and for all of us. In an age where everything is recorded for content, How do we tell the difference between a friend who cares and a predator who is just collecting data? If this investigation moved you, please share it. Awareness is the only weapon we have against the leanness of the world. Do you think the judge made the right call in denying her an audience for her journals? Or should the public have seen the full extent of her madness? Let us know in the comments below. The last recorded words of Lena Whitaker, spoken as she was being led out of the courtroom in chains, weren't an apology. She leaned toward Detective Thorne one last time and whispered, "I wonder what the acoustics are like in a solitary cell. I'll let you know if the silence has a rhythm." Thorne didn't look back. He just closed his notebook. The experiment was over.